So, hey everyone, so thrilled to have you back here with us on another episode of the Living Life Naturally podcast. And today I am so thrilled to be introducing you to Ciara Foy. I have followed her for many years, and I'm so happy to have her here and have her share her knowledge. Now, she is a celebrated expert in women's weight loss and hormone health, and she empowers high achieving women with strategies for self care and sustained energy to chase their dreams. She is the author of Empowered by Food, and she provides insights into hormone health and stress management. And then through her Empowered Feminine podcast, Ciara shares her experience overcoming weight issues, burnout, depression, and she inspires women to find joy and wellness. She's advocating for a balanced lifestyle of exercise, nature, and family time, and she reaches a global audience with her advice. She's been featured in top publications like Elle and Flair, and Ciara's expertise helps women worldwide achieve a balance and success. So, balance is so important for us. And I'm just so excited to have you here with us to share all of your expertise. So, if people don't know, tell us where you're joining us from today.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Lynn. And it's so nice to connect with somebody over a podcast. When you've been familiar with somebody, and I'm so happy to be here and to connect with you on a deeper level. So I am joining you today from Toronto, Ontario, in Canada. So Toronto is like the largest city in Canada. And I spend half of my time here and half of my time on the west coast of Canada in BC, in the interior, in a city called Kelowna. So Kelowna, BC is like just a hub for Canada's wine country, but also a massive area where entrepreneurs have gathered because the active lifestyle and all of the things that I advocate are very readily available there. So I'm very fortunate to have been able to build my dream house there and be able to spend most of my summers there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Mhm.
So, where are you from originally?
So originally, I'm from an hour north of Toronto. I was born in Barrie, Ontario. And so it's just kind of off the 400 on the way to cottage country. My parents immigrated here from Ireland in
Ah,
73, so prior to my birth. And so I am 100% Irish, but first generation Canadian.
so I come from England, in case you hadn't guessed, and my son is 100% US and 100% English, which is very unusual for people in the military to be able to keep dual citizenship, which I was so thrilled for him to be able to do that. When I became a US citizen, I had to actually renounce my citizenship for Britain, which was a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
Now it's not the same. It's changed quite a bit. And I thought about getting my passport, but with my mum passed, I really don't go over there. But this year we are hoping to go to Ireland. It was never safe there when I lived there because of the war over there with the IRA. So
Hmm.
there you go. We have something in common.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, I remember going there as a child through the borders when there was men with machine guns and actually
Yes.
holding up our Cabbage Patch Kids
Oh.
in the cars. I kid you not, because my entire family is there.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
So really, what got you? Most people have their own story or journey. What got you into this specific area of hormones and perimenopause? I understand the weight loss, and if I'm sure you've had struggles like I have with keeping weight off and not really knowing um, what was the truth about weight loss. So, what got you to where this is now your number one mission in life to help women?
Yeah. So I am very, very passionate about helping women succeed in all areas of their life. So while, my platform and what I often am talking about is, women and hormones and health and how do we elevate ourselves and understand our body better, the real reason for that is that when we have this really solid foundation of understanding our body, of understanding what's going on, understanding what kind of support she needs, then it just frees us up. It frees up our headspace. It frees up our heart space so that we can actually feel more confident in the world and we can show up as our best selves. Because, like, how many of us have been, at an event or, even with our kids or in a swimsuit, not feeling comfortable for whatever reason. And it takes up all of this space and we're not being present when, we feel like there is a misalignment between ourselves and our body, right? And sometimes we blame our body. So it's really this function of helping women to really get to the core root of what's going on for them to elevate their health so that they can break the glass ceiling, so that they can be successful in their business, so that they have that energy to like pour into the people and the things that are most important to them. So whether that be at home, their communities, their friendships, and of course, their careers or their businesses. And it really started for me. I worked on Bay Street and when I was in my early 20s, before I was married, before I had kids. So I was not a nutritionist, but in 2000, I was the law clerk who was, in the kitchen making smoothies, right? And that was unheard of because let's be honest, that was 25 years ago, right? So, literally, partners and the women that were there, I was working at Davies Ward and Beck at the time, which was one of the, top three best law firms in all of Canada in business. And so I saw women who were, overachievers, right? They were high performing and they were burning the candle at both ends. And the thing that was on the lowest part of their, priority list was themselves. So, when I had children, I went through a metamorphosis of giving up a lot of the things that had held me together, whether that be exercise or nutrition and that type of thing during my pregnancy, because none of it was rooted in my health. None of it was rooted in, how do I support my body? How do I really improve my health? I was not educated in the area. So all I thought about was like burning calories, doing cardio, eating Weight Watchers, like absolute like garbage meals, 0 calorie everything, artificial sweeteners. I had horrible gut health. I had headaches all the time. I had cystic acne on my skin, which is something that people are always like, wow, you have such beautiful skin now, but I didn't at one point. And so all of those things kept me at a particular weight. But then when I went through my pregnancy, I dropped it all because it was a pressure I had put on myself to look a certain way and to care about what other people thought. It was never about my health. And that's a real problem because that's what, drives all sorts of dysfunctional behaviors when it comes to food and our confidence and self-love. So, for me, going through that experience really gave me the lived experience of what it feels like to eat a lot of crap because I gained, at least 70 pounds with my pregnancy. And I'm a petite person. I'm only 5'3", right? So that was a lot, but it's like garbage in, garbage out. When we're not really nourishing our body and our mind, then, we're more apt, for depression. And even studies show this, right? We have a connection between our gut and our brain. And so going through all of that, having to lose weight, having postpartum depression, that's what drove me into, okay, now I want to be a nutritionist. This is what I want to do because through my own experience, I found a way to pull myself out of that. And I was like, I don't want other women to have to go through the same thing. And it was very hard for me in like mainstream medicine to figure out what was going on with me. It was really, I had to self-advocate and figure it out myself, right? So that journey is what brought me into being a nutritionist. And then the entrepreneurial journey, of course, is very much of one of self growth always. And for me, it really, I had a desire to lift women up, right? And so my experience in the law firms and seeing women, just like absolutely brilliant women making waves in the world, but not being able to take care of themselves,
Mhm.
hold together their family life, and everything that went along with that, and how that impacts their health. That is the type of woman that I decided I wanted to help. And so that's why my office was on Bay Street in the same building where I had worked as a law clerk. And that was the beginning of my practice. And so the metamorphosis to where I am today, because when I started as a nutritionist, I was 30 years old. That's after finishing school. And now I will be 49 this year. So 19 years later, over the last 10 years, I've had a massive change in my life, a lot of stress, like so many of us have. And obviously, the pandemic was a big part of that. And for me, these were the pivotal years of understanding our body even more, of really learning what it means to take care of ourselves, and thinking about, like, who do I want to be when I'm 80? Like, how do I want my life on a day-to-day basis to look? And really, committing myself to getting stronger, and all of the symptoms and all of the things that happen through our 40s and beyond, I fully believe is, like, you can say God, the universe, whatever you believe in, is like a gift to women, because we get to this place where we can no longer just get by. We can no longer put ourselves on the bottom of the list. We can no longer just like, want to fit into a dress and starve ourselves for a week. Like, all of the little things that we did in our 20s and 30s, or, the amount of work that we took on, the amount of people pleasing, all of it, we can no longer get away with it. And so it's really this reclamation for women, that when you learn the symptoms that your body is actually speaking to you in, then you can better serve yourself. You can dig deep. And this transition can be absolutely incredible, right? And I really want to bring that positive
Yes.
mindset to it, because we fear so much, like our aging, and whether it's weight, whether it's aging, whether it's disease that is in our family. And I really just want to empower women with the knowledge that this does not have to be a difficult time, and no matter when you start, just starting, you can change and transform how you feel and the expression of what your life looks like.
Right. And you said so many things there that I so advocate for myself. And it's funny. So we know we have some roots in the British Isles, but I also worked in the law field.
Oh, interesting. So funny.
Yeah. So yeah, I know totally what you mean with and they're on such time crunches that they really don't have time for self-care, like so many women in the corporate world. And then all of a sudden, bang, here they don't know what's going on with their bodies because, let's face it, until recently there was no education. And as you say, the midstream doctors don't really know how to really really help women when they get into that perimenopausal place. So we do hear so much. Women are very familiar with the fact that, oh, you have hot flashes, and oh, maybe you get these mood changes. But tell us about some of the lesser known symptoms of perimenopause that people should be aware of, because some of them to me were quite surprising.
Yeah. So it's kind of crazy, but there is like 100 symptoms.
Mm.
So some of the symptoms that women are not familiar with. So One of them that a very good friend of mine went through when she was 45, she went into menopause, because menopause is literally something that, can happen in your 40s or your 50s, right? I've even had clients who temporarily went into menopause in their 30s, which was, more than a year with no period. So, one of the things that I didn't know at the time, because I hadn't quite got into, again, the research, this is about 10 years ago when I found out about this, is a friend of mine had frozen shoulder, and not once, but twice. And it was so severe that she actually had surgery for it, not here, but in Spain. And, little did I know that that was actually low estrogen, which of course totally correlated with the fact that she had gone into menopause at 45, right when this happened. So as estrogen starts to decline, and it can be like an up and down roller coaster through perimenopause, which is really 8 to 10 years before you get to menopause, right? So, and if you're ever wondering when that might be for you, a very good indication is, when did your mom go into menopause? So if if your mom you have access to her, she is alive, and you can ask her that question, then that is a great place to start, because that'll give you a ballpark, because it's a very strong indicator. So in any case, that period of time, estrogen is going up and down. But as estrogen really starts to decline, that's when symptoms like frozen shoulder can come up. And it really is all connected to inflammation. So while, in my younger years, a lot of women would be like, oh, I have estrogen dominance, and that's why I can't lose weight, and all of these things that made them think that estrogen was a problem. The truth is that estrogen is like our beauty hormone. Estrogen is what keeps our skin hydrated and our vaginas hydrated and plump, our skin everywhere, right? And it is something that helps to reduce inflammation. So when we have low levels of estrogen, we start having higher levels of inflammation, and that's where the frozen shoulder comes in. It's also where we look at like the pain syndrome of menopause, which just recently, actually in the end of 2023, there was a study on that, and it's like 75% of women actually experience a lot of pain during perimenopause and menopause. And, there's a large percentage of them that it can be debilitating because it's so bad, right? And so that frozen shoulder is like an example of that, because that was something that totally took my friend out. She couldn't exercise. There was so many things in her life she couldn't do. So pain, joint problem, frozen shoulder, just having, like hip joint, anything that is painful is a marker of underlying inflammation, right? So anything that's like an arthritis, anything has an is on the end means inflammation. So bursitis, arthritis, all of those things. So there's an increase in that. There's also an increase when I was talking about low estrogen, then we get more vaginal dryness, but also the tissue in our vagina is very, very thin. And it is the first place that starts to get drier. It's the first place that starts to age a little bit more, because it's basically, it's not that we age, but we actually start drying up. Right. And so when that happens, that tissue can become very sensitive. And so a lot of women will experience, pain during sex, but not just that. Also pain, spontaneously, just being much more sensitive because there's not as much moisture. And then in addition to that, it can increase your risk of urinary tract infections, of yeast infections, of bacterial vaginosis, because, there is a lack of hydration and more friction. And so it's more something that, can cause more bacterial overgrowth, et cetera. Right. So a lot of women are not familiar with that. The other thing that it can cause is increased anxiety, right? So, I just kind of was mentioning things that have to do with low estrogen, but typically not everybody, and I'll tell you my story, but typically, the first hormone that starts to decline is actually progesterone in perimenopause. And so, progesterone is the hormone that is produced after you ovulate. So, after you ovulate, the second part of your cycle. So, myself, for example, I'm a late ovulator. In my peak, like fertile days, I would usually have a 30-day cycle and I would usually ovulate around like day 18 or something. But some women, it can be, average, they say is 14 to 16 days. But in any case, it's around 10 to 14 days before you get your period. Okay. And during that time, if you ovulate, then you'll have, enough progesterone. When we go through perimenopause and the quality of our eggs and our egg reserve starts to decline, we might not be ovulating every month. In fact, that's very common. If we don't ovulate, we don't get enough progesterone. The reason that causes more anxiety is because progesterone is our calming hormone. It is what helps us to feel a little bit more chill. It actually slows things down in the second part of our cycle. So some women will also notice they get, they might feel a little bit more chill, but it also slows down their motility. So gut health and just feeling more constipated in that second part of our cycle. But when we don't have progesterone, then our anxiety level is higher because in that part of our cycle, our metabolism is a little bit higher, our resilience to stress is a little bit lower. So, especially if you are a woman who is a high performer, who's not getting enough sleep, who's burning the candle at both ends, even in your peak fertile years, you can be struggling with low progesterone levels because your body will be saying, well, she's really stressed. Maybe she's skipping meals. Maybe she's dieting too much. And those are all signals to your body that things aren't okay. Not a good time to have a baby. So, a lot of the same raw materials can be used to make cortisol, our stress hormone, instead of progesterone. And that's a very simplistic way of talking about it. But basically, high stress also can lead to shorter cycles and more anxiety and less progesterone. But even if you're doing everything right, as you go through perimenopause, that will naturally start to decline. So a lot of women are getting diagnosed for the first time with ADHD, having a more difficult time with anxiety, managing stress, and we just become a little bit less resilient naturally, which is why I said, like, this is the time when there's just so many things we can't get away with, right? In addition to that, there's dry eyes. We will feel dry skin, itchy ears, definitely like just dry hair. And there's a lot of other changes that happen, such as major changes in our microbiome that are happening, which very much correlate to our body composition and can actually increase visceral fat, which is the fat that we store around our organs. So that and stress, like changes in our microbiome and stress, are some of the big things that we see in studies that are like during this transition period are really kind of going offline from what we were used to. Right? So we have to spend a lot more time doubling down on how do we support our body from a perspective of our digestion. But our microbiome is more than just our digestion because it's responsible for more than 80% of our immune system, right? So if it's responsible for more than 80% of our immune system, it's also responsible for a massive part of our health and disease risk, et cetera. So those are just like a few things that could be happening. And the other big one with the increased anxiety and stress and low progesterone is it really impacts a woman's ability to sleep. So if you've been kind of getting away with just a little bit of sleep, or you were an okay sleeper, but you didn't have great sleep habits, then you're probably going to notice that even more during this time.
So true. And you haven't really talked, well, you did mention cortisol, but you've got cortisol, you've got insulin, you've got your thyroid function, And so many women have thyroid issues during this period of time, and maybe they don't even realize it. So, what can women do so that they can keep these kinds of things in better balance?
Yeah, for sure. So, a lot of that has to do with stress. And what I first want women to hear so that they don't tune this out, because I find that women really get frustrated when they hear that, we have to manage our stress better, because it's very easy from a mindset perspective to go into, you know, I can't control what is going on in my life. There's so many things that are outside of my control, right? And so I want women to know that even if life feels crazy, like in the last 4 years, I built a house across the country. I was in a family law court situation for 4 years, right? While doing that, while putting myself into a new place, building community, I, like absolutely just blew up my business during that time. And I was in perimenopause and I still am.
Mm,
Okay.
mm,
So that doesn't mean that it wasn't all stressful for me. It was incredibly stressful. But because of me and because of my knowledge of understanding how to take care of my body, I focused on what I did have control over because there was a whole bunch of things I didn't, right? So I didn't put time and effort into that. I put time and effort into what I could do. And that is the big part of what I teach women. And it's the adrenal thyroid connection that we need to think about when it comes to perimenopause. So, anybody who's having a lot of stress also needs to be aware that they need to support their thyroid because it's the stress that impacts the function of the thyroid, right? And it's not your body working against you, it's her trying to protect you. So, getting back into thyroid and the adrenal and the stress connection, there's a reason why most people who get an autoimmune disease, the majority are women. Okay. And it goes back to, how much we put on our place, how much we say yes to other people when it's really a no for us, when we don't have the bandwidth, we don't have the time, or we're having to say no to something that would really support us, right? But we want to be good women, good mothers, good daughters, good wives. And so we really put way too much stress on ourselves. And this is the time of our life when we have to really look at what's important, really establish what our values are, what our priorities are, make sure we're on the top of that list so that we can continue to pour into what's really important to us. Because we as women always have more stress. And the way that we are built biologically is that we are much more sensitive to that stress because, again, whether we like it or not, women are biologically built to reproduce. And so a lot of what goes on from perspective of our body is, are we safe? Do we have enough food? Is everything okay? Is it a good time to have a baby? Right? So we are naturally more sensitive to stress for that reason, right? So and that is the reason that researchers have found that women have more incidence of autoimmune disease. And so an example of an autoimmune disease goes back into this adrenal, which has to do with, our 24-hour cortisol pattern and stress, our HPA axis, and its connection to our thyroid. So a lot of the autoimmune disease that I see in my practice is Hashimoto's. So Hashimoto's is low thyroid disease, and about 90, sometimes they say 95% of women who have hypothyroidism, it is actually Hashimoto's and an autoimmune part of that. So that is something that is so, so important. So that is why we have to really nail down the things that we know that we need in this time in our life. And for example, that can be really simple. For me, when things were really stressful, my motto is the harder life is, the more I double down on the things that keep me going, right? So, like, sleep is number one, going to bed at the same time, getting up at the same time, being very protective of that. And my nutrition, helping to take stress off of my body. So I might not be able to control the stress outside, but I can manage my blood sugar with what I'm eating. I can make sure I don't skip meals. I can make sure that I'm getting, lots of fiber, vegetables, protein, carbohydrates every meal. So I'm having more steady blood sugar. And when we have more steady blood sugar, we're automatically reducing how much inflammation we have in the body. And we're taking the pressure off of our body so that she's not always having to control it for us. And that takes us off of the up and down roller coaster of our mood, our hunger, and also our energy. So a lot of the things that I teach women are like, there's so much under your control. Don't worry so much about the things that you can't control, right? The work stuff, with me, like being in family court is just like, I feel like I ran like 1,000 marathons,
Oh,
literally,
no.
you know? But it was also something like that is so good for our personal growth. And like, hey, I have to like double down and walk my talk, right? And so you really learn, what you have to do to hold everything together. And that is exactly what I did. And that is why, I'm such an advocate for women. You want to be a high performer, you want to be successful, you want to go out there and have an impact in the world. Amazing. Like, let me show you how you can do that without burning yourself out. Right? Or if you've burnt yourself out, let's show you how you can get back on top because you can. I've been there. I've done it. I wrote the book on it. So, and that's really where my passion comes from. And each stage of our lives has different challenges, right? And that's what they
Right.
are. They're challenges. They're not blocks. They're not there to stop us. They don't mean that we can't be, healthier, happier, fitter as we get older. We can do anything. We really can. But it's a mindset piece first and foremost, because most women don't believe that that's possible. And so that's also a big part of my work, is that I want you to know that it's possible. Like, your dreams are there for a reason.
Right. There's so much that we could talk on this subject, and so much more that I wanted to ask you. Would it be possible if I invited you back for a second interview and we can get a little more in depth about some of the other pieces that go with perimenopause?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
happy to chat. Yeah.
Okay. That would be
Mhm.
great.
And if your
So,
guests, like your community, has questions, or I just touched on something and they're like, oh, can we like double click on that? That would be super helpful too. I
okay.
love people like reaching out to me on a DM and be like, I heard you and I want to like know more about this. Absolutely. Because then when we come back, we can make sure that we have all the answers for you too.
Right. That would be great. That would be great. So thank you so much for joining me from probably pretty cold Ontario,
Yes,
Toronto. Yeah.
absolutely. And I will say before I run that for anybody looking for more information, I gave you a link that we will have in the
Yes.
show notes for a masterclass. So I have a 2-part masterclass that is completely free, and it is metabolic mastery for women over 40. And it dives into a lot of this. And the first one, we really touch on gut health, which I know is a huge pain point for so many of us.
Yes, it is. And it's something that people are only just really becoming aware of because uh, health providers really don't want to believe that there's a link there for our gut health, and it's just so important. So
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, it's so important. That little piece of the of my puzzle, I kind of left out, but that was part of why I went back to be a nutritionist was because of gut health issues from all the crappy food that I was eating and all the artificial stuff. And I had to figure it out myself because, it's not doctors' fault. The truth is that they are taught to diagnose and treat disease.
Yes.
So when you don't have a disease, they don't have a lot in their tool belt. That's just not, what they were taught or their purpose either.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
absolutely true. Same with the whole hormone thing. They just didn't have the teaching beyond a couple of hours where they can really help us. And I hope that now that the talk is a lot more out there, more people are talking about menopause and hormones. It would be my hope that some of them with their CMEs that they're doing, CLEs, whichever ones they do, maybe they can get more into this because women really need to be able to feel comfortable going to the doctor and getting answers to their questions.
Yes, you're right, because that is, twofold. What I do in my practice has nothing to do with, BHRT or HRT,
Mm,
but in the last couple of years, it is something that I do help educate women on so that they can advocate for themselves with their healthcare
yes,
practitioner, right? So they can
yes,
know what they're looking for, so that they know the language to use, what to ask for, et cetera. And then to back them up with here's the studies as well, because sometimes it's up to us as women to help to push forward the education that is necessary. Because unfortunately, like in Canada, for example, our healthcare workers are so overworked. A lot of us, like, I don't even have a doctor anymore since I went to
mm,
BC. I use a naturopath, and they don't have the time necessarily. So, there's still a massive gap there. And so myself and, other friends of mine who are practitioners, while we might not be giving the prescriptions, we can certainly, really fill that education piece so that they feel confident having those conversations.
yes, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So great. I look forward to seeing you sometime shortly in the future. I will put in everything that women need to be able to get in touch with you. I'm excited about your metabolic mastery. That that is such a huge part of it, the whole metabolic mystery. You called it mastery, but to a lot of us as women, it's a mystery. So that would
Yeah.
be great.
Yeah, it really is. And, you know, the more that you can, close the gaps and what we don't know. And I will leave you with for everybody listening. The number one thing that I always recommend is to get curious. Get curious of
Mm,
what your body is trying to tell you because she's always on your side. She's always doing the best that she can. And the more that, we really believe that and realize that, we will look for, what it is that we don't know to help to support her instead of thinking that she's working against us.
mm. Well, thank you so much. And before we hop off, I just want to remind you if you want to connect with me or get into my private Facebook community, all of those links will be underneath as well. I would love a chance to chat with you. Always love to get to know the people in my community. So thanks for being with us today. And thank you, Ciara. It's been really great.
Thank you so much for having me, Lynn. I look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Okay. You have been listening to the Living Life Naturally podcast, where we're on a mission to inform, inspire, and encourage women to live their best life confidently, joyfully, and freely from what's been holding them back. For show notes and free resources, visit holistic-healthandwellness.com. And I'd be delighted if you'd follow us on socials to connect further. If you enjoyed this show, why not share it with your friends? If you found good value, chances are they will too. And of course, a 5-star review on iTunes is always greatly appreciated, as much as I appreciate you listening. So until next time, live life naturally and joyfully.